everybody. Welcome back. We are on chapter 2 of A History of Murder. This is a read aloud of my novel, and if you have missed the prologue in chapter 1, then I will be leaving the links down below so you can click on those and get caught up so that you can know what's already happened. So let's get into chapter 2, which is titled The Hostess of the Mansion. "Let's bake some cookies," Grandma Lily said, smiling coyly. I sighed. She did it. She got me back to town, and now here we were talking about everyday things like baking cookies. Who would have thought? Grandma, Elliot, and I gathered in the kitchen. About a year before, Grandma had remodeled the room with a strong eye for vintage style. I loved everything she had done. While I had seen photos and video chatted with her for tours, nothing compared to seeing it with my own eyes. My favorites were the deep farmhouse sink and gorgeous glass-fronted cabinets. Grandma Lily knew she couldn't have a modern-looking kitchen in a house famous for its historical authenticity. "Okay, Grandma, what's up with the cat?" She giggled. He showed up a little while back, kept hanging out with me on the front porch. Eventually, I told him he could stay. Come to think of it, that's about how I ended up with Art. She giggled again, mentioning her boyfriend. I was going to ask about her relationship with Art. I needed to make an effort because I hadn't exactly been supportive when they began dating. But as time passed, she seemed happy. I decided he was good for her. I sat on a floral upholstered bar stool behind Grandma Lily's kitchen island and let my head rest on my arms. Now that I wasn't living in fear that I would find her dead, I could actually relax. Grandma worked on cutting the tube of store-bought cookie dough into discs and placed them onto a cookie sheet. She was a fantastic cook and baker, but always told me that having fresh cookies on hand was a household must, even if you cheated once in a while. All of a sudden, I was swallowed up by the feeling of being at home. It was cozy and warm. It smelled good, like Grandma and all of her things. It had been my family's home for generations, and mine each summer when I visited Grandma and Grandpa. In my nostalgia, I left Grandma Lily working in the kitchen and began to wander down the hallway. I peeked in the rooms and investigated all the little nooks and crannies of the home. Just inside the front door was a spacious foyer. It had a built-in bench where in days of yore, suitors had to wait when calling on a girl. To the left of the foyer was the library and then the dining room. To the right was the large parlor. A small bathroom, converted from a closet once the house got running water, was situated in the hallway outside of the parlor. I climbed the broad, ornately carved cherry wood staircase and stood on the second floor landing. I looked towards what had been my bedroom. It was decorated the same, pink and white ruffles all around, and an ornate iron bed that had been in the family forever. That room had been my sanctuary that hot summer 13 years ago, but I would wait to visit it. I needed to parcel out the emotions I was feeling being back here after so much time. On the third floor of Jericho House was the ballroom, an open space where my ancestors held lavish parties. I doubted anyone went up there much anymore. Elliot the cat traced my steps, seeming wary of me. I wasn't surprised that Grandma Lily took him in. She was that way. Kind-hearted, compassionate, a giver. I thought. What kind of kind-hearted giver mischievously lies to her own granddaughter? Grandma's suggestion that I come back to Jericho Falls for good was absolutely preposterous. Of course, I wished we saw each other more, but we always met on our birthdays. Hers in October, mine in February. We'd choose a place off our bucket lists to meet up and enjoy a girls' trip together. And until my parents had retired and decided to travel the world, she'd always spent Christmas time with us. I realized that she was probably worried about me living all alone in Idaho now. I heard the sound of the hand-turned doorbell. Grandma sang the word, "Coming," as she hurried to answer it. I stood there on the landing, waiting to see who was arriving. This second-story view took me back to my childhood, when I would run and stand right here to see what partygoers were coming to the house for their festivities, or watch a group of tourists arrive for their home tour hosted by Grandma and Grandpa dressed in period clothing. I suppose I always imagined that someday I would be the mansion's hostess, helping others enjoy the beauty of this old home and the special time period it represents. I thought I might pursue a history degree, giving even more credence to my passion for the past. But that didn't happen. And now I was just a barista living a meager, lonely lifestyle in suburban Idaho. It was as if my real life went on hold somewhere along the way. Grandma Lily chatted with the visitor, probably scheduling an event in the appointment book she kept by the front door. I smiled at the sound of their voices. She loved being the keeper of this grand place so much. Nothing made her happier than showing visitors around or allowing them to use the house, if only for an afternoon. I ventured downstairs to find her with a white-haired fellow dressed in a top hat and tails. They had their heads together, whispering closer than necessary for event planning. Was this Art? I let out a little cough. "Chloe, you startled me," said Grandma Lily. The man smiled. He was handsome, with a glow that suggested he liked to be outdoors. "Ah, we finally meet. Wow, you do look like your grandmother. Beautiful, that is." I had to laugh. My hair was a rat's nest, and my clothes were rumpled. My grandma, however, looked as fresh and youthful as a daisy. "Thank you," I said. "I'm happy to meet you." He took a bow with a flourish of his top hat. "I'm Arthur Macmillan." We shook hands, and I managed a smile. "Why so dressed up?" I asked him. "I work at the Opera House. I'm a sort of jack-of-all-trades there. Tonight I'm needed as an usher for a private show. I thought I'd drop by and say hello to Lil. It'll be past my bedtime once the show is over." Grandma Lily smiled. "Don't let Art fool you. He is more energetic than men half his age." She asked us to have a seat and said she'd get a tray of cookies and some iced tea. "I'd never turn down your homemade cookies, Lil," Art said. Grandma winked at me and hurried down the hallway to the kitchen. Yep, they were smitten with one another. And what could I do about it? I had tried the snotty kid who missed her grandpa routine to no avail. But heck, it had been years since Grandpa died, and Art seemed nice enough. He was certainly handsome and seemed to adore Grandma. So what was I fighting? Art and I took a seat in the library. "So, Chloe, Lily tells me you've been living in Idaho?" I nodded. "Boise. I grew up there, but spent most summers here in Jericho Falls." He smiled. "She always thought you'd move here one day, you know." "I thought so too," I said uneasily. Though my parents couldn't wait to leave their small Western-themed hometown, I wanted nothing more than to stay. I hated each August as the days counted down to the start of another school year when I would have to go home. But my last summer here, when I was 16, everything changed. I never returned, until now. Art leaned forward to rest his elbows on his knees. "Well, make sure and do what's best for you. Don't let your grandma pressure you into anything. We're doing fine here." What a strange thing to say. It was almost as if Art didn't like the idea of me being here. I tried not to feel offended, but in my view, he was overstepping his bounds. I was about to tell him to mind his own business when Grandma Lily returned. She had cookies and glasses of iced tea on a tray, complete with a lace doily. She truly was the perfect hostess. When she joined us, she seemed to notice the tension in the room. "Are you two getting acquainted?" I heard concern in her voice. Neither Art nor I said a word. Grandma set the tray down on the end table before attempting to get the conversation flowing again. She looked at me. "Chloe, tell us about your drive down. Did you have nice weather?" "Weather? Really? To be honest, I didn't notice. I was too worried about you. Worried about Lil? Art asked. Why's that? Grandma smiled at him sheepishly. I played a little trick on Chloe, she explained. I let her believe I wasn't feeling well. You lied to Chloe so she would rush to your side? Art asked. He looked genuinely shocked. I dropped everything and drove straight through, I said. I had the best of intentions in mind. I've missed her so much, and she wouldn't have come otherwise, Grandma defended. Little did she know, her best of intentions were likely going to cost me the manager position I'd been working on for a year. My anger at her was beginning to well back up. Art didn't appear too happy about it either. Well, Lily, I must admit it doesn't seem like you to do something so deceitful. I'm surprised. He turned, in a rather huffy manner, to set his iced tea on the side table. When he did, he bumped the antique etched mirror sitting there. It toppled over with a bang. 1,000 reflective shards sprayed across the hardwood floor. Oh, dear! Grandma Lily jumped. I'm so sorry, Art said, as surprised as we were. Don't you worry, Grandma said. Accidents happen. Grandma and I hurried to get the mop, broom, and dustpan. We sopped up the tea. Then we carefully swept the room, searching for every tiny piece of glass. Art helped and continued to apologize over and over for our clumsiness. For his clumsiness. As we were finishing up, I noticed a single drop of blood rising from my fingertip. Though hard to imagine, the visit was even more uncomfortable afterwards. The conversation was stilted, and Art seemed unhappy with Grandma Lily. At last, he quickly gobbled a cookie, and we all said goodbyes. When he had gone, Grandma frowned. I didn't like that. What? A broken mirror is a bad omen, Chloe. That's nothing but a silly superstition, Grandma. She didn't look convinced. I'll bury the pieces outside tonight in the moonlight, just to be sure. We don't need any more bad luck. At the time, I thought she was referring to our bad luck years ago. And with me being back in town, it kind of figured that any dark vibes Grandma was feeling could be because of that. But soon I'd discover it wasn't what she meant at all. Let's go sit on the porch and relax, I suggested, hoping the superstitious talk was out of her system. We were getting settled into white wicker chairs with big comfy pillows, our fresh glasses of iced tea situated on the matching table, when a young blonde woman came up the sidewalk. She had a tiny white dog on a hot pink leash. The woman wore a floral skirt that would have been cute on a 10-year-old, but was embarrassingly short for someone who I guessed was in her late 20s, like me. She paired the skirt with a tight yellow tank top and a matching yellow visor. This must be her, the woman chirped. Bree Brandon, this is my granddaughter Chloe, my grandma said. Thin and athletic, Bree bounded towards me and gave me a tight squeeze. I'm so happy that we're finally meeting. Lily talks about you all the time. I feel like we're already best friends. You're so pretty. I wish I had long hair like yours. Do you need some tips on taming that frizz? I can give you some pointers on products to use. She reached out to touch my hair. My all day in a car thinking my granny was about to die hair, that is. I pulled away to avoid her. Grandma took a sip of tea. Bree's a stylist downtown. That's right, I own Bree's Beauty Salon, she pointed down the street. It's on the corner. You can barely spot the sign from here. See? She turned around to look at me. Are you looking, Chloe? I feigned a glance in that direction and nodded. Maybe it was only fatigue, but this woman was getting on my nerves. Well, Marilyn needs to stretch her legs, so we'll be off, but I had to stop by and meet you, Bree said. She started down the walk with her dog Marilyn, but then turned back. Remember Poison Pen Club Thursday night, Lily. I can't wait to hear everyone's opinion on Chapter 7. Wasn't it shocking? Grandma Lily agreed, and Bree bounced away. I let a long, beautiful moment of silence pass after Bree had gone. Then I asked, Poison Pen? It's a mystery book club, Grandma Lily explained. They meet at the house each week. Sometimes I sit in. They won't mind if you join us on Thursday evening. I smiled wryly. I told you, Grandma, I'm going home in the morning. I know that's what you said, but I want to keep you here so we can be close. I sighed and put my hand on hers. I know, I want that too, but it doesn't change things. It was so long ago, and you had big plans, Grandma Lily whispered, looking into my eyes. I shook my head sternly for her to understand that I wasn't going to talk about it, but I knew she would return to the topic eventually. For a while we just sat holding hands and listening to the chirping birds. The lawn was groomed perfectly, and the flowering bushes were in full show. I couldn't imagine a more beautiful spot to spend a quiet afternoon. Let's go downtown for dinner at Joey's later, Grandma suggested. It was her favorite steakhouse. I realized I was starving and agreed that a big fat steak sounded great. But first, Grandma Lily said, I have a surprise for you. I think I've had enough of your surprises for one day, I said, raising an eyebrow at her. Grandma gave me a sorrowful look. I think you'll like this one. She stood and hurried inside the house for a moment. When she returned, she was carrying a shoebox. On the top was written my name, but Grandma Lily's address. No return address was listed. This was mailed to me? Here? I hope you don't mind that I opened it when it arrived, she said, with a look of worry. Of course not, I said. But who is it from? Go ahead. Open it, Grandma whispered. A wave of cold fear spread over me. I looked into her face. She nodded with encouragement. I slowly lifted the lid to the box and braced myself for what I would find. Inside were various items that I recognized at once. A gold keychain with the initial C, some CDs, a pair of red sunglasses, a friendship bracelet, and a locked diary. I found that my mouth had gone dry. These were Christie's, I said, hardly recognizing my own voice. Grandma reached out to me. She took my shaking hand. There's a note in the bottom, she explained. Her mother wanted you to have them. My eyes filled with tears. She did? Are you sure? Grandma Lily nodded and patted my arm. It's okay, dear. She sent this to you. I swallowed hard and gently placed the lid on the box once again. I rubbed the scar on my knee absent-mindedly. I could feel the thick, raised ridge even through the denim of my jeans. I'm so surprised, I said. Christy's mom wouldn't speak to me. It's been a long time. Maybe she's ready. I closed my eyes. But was I? Grandma suggested we put the box aside to look through later and leave for dinner. I was quite happy to ignore the box's very existence, so I told her it was a great plan. I'll leave it in your bedroom and get my things, said Grandma Lily. So even though we're not completely through chapter 2, I think that's where we're going to stop today because it's been a long span and this is a great stopping point. Remember that if you missed the prologue or chapter 1, to go back and watch those videos so that you're all caught up. And if you're enjoying this, would you please give me a thumbs up so that we can get some more traffic to the story? And then we'll see you next time. Thanks.